What did I say?
It's split into two files,
okay.
so it's a really...
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's...
You good to keep going?
Yeah.
I want to pause there because we got you to Pilsen in this story. Can I back up and ask you one question about sort of the political awakening and how that you had in Mexico? How does it affect your artistic practice? How does that translate onto the brush or the canvas for you? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, so I arrived in Pilsen, and the first 2 years I was doing my own thing. Some of those paintings I did, they were so good. One of them, right, is hanging at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. And I was only 20, 21 years old. And it's a masterpiece. I can tell you it is, because it shows it has the main. It's called The Anguish of Being.
The Anguish of Being.
Yeah, of being, yeah. When I arrived in Pilsen, Pilsen was an abandoned neighborhood. It looked like the set of the movie by Orson Welles called Touch of Evil. It was dark, it was dangerous, it was poor, and there was like 4 to 5 bars in every block. Working class, drugs. It looked like Tijuana in the 50s. And I've been to Tijuana, but I imagine that's how it looked like.
Well, Touch of Evil's a good
yeah.
example.
And the reason why I want to write a book is because I want to say exactly what I think. Most of the economy was based on the black market. In the 70s, Pilsen became known as, and it seems like I'm the only one that knew, became the empire, one of the empires of narco-trafficking in the world. So when you see that and you have aspirations of becoming an activist and an artist, you feel like it's like an octopus, a monster that's destroying society.
What would have been trafficked through Pilsen in the 70s?
I think I saw it all, right? So I saw at the beginning, you see how your block changes, or your town or your neighborhood. And what I saw is on Taylor Street, some of the gangs that used to be on Taylor Street moved to Pilsen. Some of them still around. But the ones that I saw in the 60s, they were gangs that looked more like they came out of the movie of West Side Story. You know? They didn't really kill each other, or there was nothing to really fight over. But the moment when Richard Nixon created a war on drugs, everything changed. So it's very easy to think that it was a conspiracy. Not only to destabilize poor neighborhoods, but to destabilize nations and our world. So let's say it started in Pilsen when I see the gangbangers started to carry weapons and fight for their territories and killing each other like flies. Unable to organize, even the Brown Berets, who were the ones that built Casaslan, who were supposed to be like, you know, like activists, and they couldn't stop anything. As a matter of fact, I think they were part of the problem. Because I mentioned about Mexican infant nationalism. Mexican infant nationalism reminds me of the whole thing that the PRI created, you know, PRI, which is the Mexican Partido, and kept every Mexican sleeping, you know, waving their flags and their hats and turning into themselves into stereotypes with images like Virgen de Guadalupe, Frida Kahlo, and Dia de los Muertos, and I think that all that ended up into what it is today, so infantile, so absurd that it gets me angry, because what happened last year, the Terra Museum gave millions of dollars to institutions, cultural institutions, including the Mexican Museum. And the aim was to rescue the work that was done in the 1800s up until 1975. Among those was the muralists. Okay, this woman who was well educated curated a show in the South Side with the black community, and they had a show at the Smart Museum, which is a very good museum in the University of Chicago. I went to see the show. I knew the guys. I met him in the beginning of the mural movement. I remember William Walker, because the mural that we were going to see today, the anti-World War, we wanted to paint it in William Walker's neighborhood in the South Side. So we're walking around and we noticed that there is no walls. They were already destroyed the neighborhood, so there were no walls to paint. Plus, he said, I remember very well what he said. He says, I don't want these white liberals telling me what to do. I don't want to paint no World War mural in my neighborhood. We have our own wars. We have prostitution, drug addiction. I says, you're right. Let's get the hell out of here. And I took them. I says, let's choose a neutral wall, which is 18 and Western. And that's why he just said, we don't go all the way over there. All the way over there is in the neighborhood, for crying out loud. And so that's where we painted it there. Anyway, so going back to the exhibit last year, the one who did such a terrific job that show ended up in the best magazines. It ended up in the New York Times, in our forum. Right now, as we speak, some of those artists are still alive. They're about my age, like 70. They are commanding like $500,000 for their work. They're selling their work for $500,000.
What was? Did you say the name of that exhibition?
I think it's called Now is the Time.
Now is the time.
Yes.
We'll look it up.
A total success. Okay. She revived that movement. There was, for obvious reasons, it was never part of the mainstream. Some friend of mine that went to see, he goes, you know what? Those guys did a lot, much more than whatever Andy Warhol did. Yeah. And then I look in, so, you know, they are very happy with all that. I am happy for them. There are books, you know, I have one of them, movies, everything. And some of the white folks also, you know, saluting themselves and getting recognition. But then the next man said, well, what happened to us? If we're so famous for our murals, where the hell are we? What happened to the Mexican Museum? What did they do with the money they received from the Terra Museum? Well, the curator, and I'm going to mention his name, chose to bring sculptures that done by some sort of Mexicans from the 1800s. They look horrible. They were not Mexican. They were sculptures aimed at the international show of Chicago.
Like the 1893
Yeah,
Colombian exhibition.
it is. You know, you can say there was no Mexican culture, Mexican art at that time. It's not until the Mexican muralists arrived and throw away everything that had to do with Spain. But it was, to me, it was a slap in the face, because they could have used that space, you know, to do some academic research on what we did from 1970 to today. Nothing. It was all infantile stuff, like always.
You've used this phrase infantile a few times. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
What I mean is when you want to represent your identity and you go for the easiest part, it's so easy to copy imagery from the Aztecs or the Mayans that even in primary schools they don't let you do it in Mexico. I think it's something that started with the gangbangers when they wanted to show their identity. They will go for Aztecs only because they see themselves as warriors, which they are, but not conscious warriors, because they were really good in killing each other for all these decades. You know, some they call themselves like Aztec warriors, or they call themselves, you know, the guys from South America, or the Incas, Supreme Incas. And that's what he said, right? But someone like Ray Patlan, who was the guy that painted Casaslan for the first time, a guy who went to Vietnam, came back all fucked up. You can see his infant nationalism. He did not go the way to study in deep the history of the Mexican muralists. He only did a little copying of the very bellied, very ugly figures a la cicadas, or when they paint their hands coming out. You can see them all over the United States. Not a deep study, in architecture or history or nothing of that sort. So back then he got away with it, and I still think he still getting away with it. But he became the infante terrible of the 60s for the liberals. But I look back, and I was never part of that whole thing because I use the word because that's what it is, infantile stuff. It's not political. It's not aesthetically well done. It's nothing. And it's sad for me that that's what it represents us up until today. Like when I told you that kids are growing up to think that it is the right thing to do is to identify with the Aztecs and with Frida Kahlo and all that stuff. So when you come into the neighborhood and you're looking for something, you go into any cafe, and what I see in every cafe now is I see taco art. Now, you want me to explain what taco art is? It's a great, but this is what taco art is. Taco art is the kind of art that's done by an artist who couldn't deliver, and in order for him to pay the rent, he has to go commercial. So he will paint the dictates of people who own taquerias or restaurants, and which are most of them have to do with creating a self-image of a stereotype Mexican.
That stuff's very beloved right now. Every time we come to Pilsen, it feels like there's more of that kind of stuff on the walls, include inside businesses, outside walls. It's very charismatic. So what would you say to somebody who would say...
what do you mean by charismatic?
It's charismatic because it's drawing people in. It's you see it on social media, people taking selfies and stuff. Why do you think people are so drawn to those kinds of motifs that you're talking about?
Okay, first of all, what I have experienced all my life is because most of my work is almost militant in the message. It's not that they're not interested, it's just that the media and people that deal with culture in Pilsen have nothing to do with culture. They are totally ignorant of what culture is. So they go to the easiest part. To see the Mexican sleeping under a cactus is funny. And they have a hard time looking at something like what I would want to say. Like let's say I want to paint something against the U.S. invasion of Venezuela. I will do it. This is what I did in the 80s when I painted the people of Central America toppling Somoza. They don't want to deal with it. They're not interested. Why? Because of the Mexican infantile nationalism.
But this is a tension we've traced from the 70s, I think, to the present in our research, is looking at that tension between the impulse to commercialize muralism, public art, and the politics. If I could, make an editorial claim for a second, you seem like you've been on the political side and you've sort of been able to avoid the commercialism.
Yes.
How did you do that?
Okay, when I decided to become an artist, and I have the watch to prove it, I came to the conclusion that I will be an artist and I will be a free thinker. And for me to do it, I was going to walk through hell, meaning I never have any money. I always live according to my possibilities. I never got paid for anything that I ever painted on the walls of Pilsen. I had never received any kind of salute or nothing. It's like I don't exist. Second, I was never part of the Mexican nationalists because I had other worries. While they were worrying about the neighborhood, I was worried about the whole continent. was written about the moral doctrine and how it's been re-implemented today through other means, like technology and globalization. It's very bad, and I know where it's going. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying because I set up a machine that's called the death machine. It's global.
A what machine?
Death machine.
Okay.
Where it's easy for them to kill, they have what they call, what we call, it's a war against the youth, because the youth has always been the warriors to change society. There is a war on the poor. So all the murals that I've ever done, people are not interested because they want to see funny, nice things. And globalization makes sure that that's what they get, a false identity. For instance, imagine, on one side you have the people that are pro-Trump. They're poor. They're poor, but they are patriotic. They will wave their flag, and they will say, fuck Mexicans, fuck Muslims, fuck everybody. We are for Trump. Well, those are nationalists, white nationalists. And then we have the Chicano nationalists. How can you find, today or ever, how can you find nationalism by nationalism? You can't. Why?
What's the alternative?
The alternative is to join other forces, other groups, and grow as a force against the machine. Not in your little neighborhood, you know. That's why all the artists for Pearson ended up all isolated. They don't exist.
I want to ask you something about the commercialization of art in Pilsen, these motifs that you're talking about that seem to get on your nerves. You know, but one thing that strikes me as you're talking about that is that your work, World War III, you know, that work has been one of the longest standing pieces of public art in Pilsen.
That's because I painted it 3 times.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, the first time I went up, you know, and I said I have to repaint it because this mural it's very significant. The message is very strong. I went to Carlos Tortolero, director of the museum, to if he could borrow or lend me $500, which is nothing. He said no. 3 times I asked him for $500.
Is this in the 80s or what?
The 80s, 90s.
80s, 90s, okay.
And this last one. He refused to give me any money. So I went around asking for friends. I raised about $2,000. Yes, you know, for materials. And that's how I kept it alive. And, you know, I just edited the image of Donald Trump, which is, when we painted the mural against the World War, it was fun.